The air in the International Hotel showroom crackled with an energy that could only mean one thing: Elvis. It was 1970, and Las Vegas was his kingdom. The lights dimmed, the tension mounted, and then with a flourish of trumpets and a roar from the crowd, he burst onto the stage. He was magnificent, a vision in white studded with rhinestones that glittered under the spotlights. The crowd, a sea of adoring fans, erupted. Elvis Presley grabbed the microphone, his smile dazzling, his eyes scanning the packed room. He fed off their energy, absorbing it, amplifying it, then throwing it back at them in a wave of pure showmanship. He swayed, he posed, he crooned the opening lines of "That's All Right," and the place went wild. The band was tight, every note perfect, every beat a jolt of electricity. This was his element, his stage, his moment. There was nowhere else in the world he'd rather be. He moved across the stage, a blur of fringed fabric and Mydock swagger. He hit the high notes. He dropped to his knees, he tilted his head, flashing that famous smirk. Women screamed, men cheered, and the rhythm of the music pulsed through the very foundations of the hotel. He was the king, and he reigned supreme. He was so caught up in the performance, in the sheer thrill of it all, that he barely registered the low rumble that started beneath his feet. It was subtle at first, like the vibrations from a particularly powerful bass drum or maybe a massive truck driving by outside. Elvis, ever the professional, just incorporated it into his moves. He thought, "Man, they really cranked up the subwoofers tonight. This is some serious sound." He leaned into a powerful chord, letting the perceived vibrations flow through him, making his gyrations even more dramatic, more able. Crowd, perhaps sensing a new, deeper resonance in the music, cheered even louder. He was deep into proud merry sweat beading on his brow. The mic stand, his only prop. When the rumble intensified, this wasn't just a vibration anymore. The stage lights above him began to sway ever so slightly, like pendulums caught in a gentle breeze. A decorative potted palm near the edge of the stage trembled, its fronds rustling. Elvis grinned. "Wow, they really went all out with the special effects tonight," he thought, impressed. He'd heard whispers about a new experimental light and sound show being tested, something groundbreaking. This must be it. He adjusted his stance, making his next hip thrust even more exaggerated, playing into the illusion of a shaking stage. "You're a real shaker, baby." He ad-libbed into the mic, winking at the front row, who shrieked with delight. He imagined the audience felt the same vibrations, making the experience even more immersive. This was next-level stuff. He felt a surge of pride, thinking about how he was probably the first artist to perform with such cutting-edge stage effects. He could just imagine Colonel Parker, his manager, beaming from the back of the room, already mentally counting the extra ticket sales the spectacle would bring. The tremors became more distinct now. A few glasses clanked together on the tables in the audience. A chandelier in the distance swung a little more noticeably. For Elvis, bathed in the spotlight, lost in the roar of the crowd, in the roar of his own music, it was all part of the show. He was in his own world, a world where the stage came alive, where the very earth seemed to dance to his tune. He was the master of ceremonies, guiding his audience through an unforgettable, heart-pounding experience. He believed he was making history, not just with his voice, but with the revolutionary new stage effects that were shaking the very foundations of the International Hotel. He belted out the chorus, his voice soaring, completely oblivious to the dawning realization of panic, slowly spreading through the first few rows of the audience. For Elvis, it was simply the most incredibly realistic special effect he had ever encountered. And he was determined to make the most of it. The rumble grew into a rhythmic shudder. Elvis, still beaming, saw the flickering of the massive stage lights above him. They weren't just swaying now. They were swinging with a noticeable arc, casting dancing shadows across the stage. Prop microphone stand, one of the spares near the drum kit, tipped over with a clatter. Elvis simply kicked it aside with a practiced flick of his boot, never missing a beat. He thought, "Man, this is wild. They must have hidden some kind of hydraulic system under the stage. It feels like the whole building is moving." He decided to lean into it. As the stage floor vibrated beneath his feet, he incorporated it into his iconic moves. His knee trembled just a little more as he hit a low note. His hips swiveled with a greater, almost uncontrolled energy, as if propelled by the unseen forces. He imagined it looked incredibly dramatic from the audience. A performer so powerful he could literally shake the ground he stood on. He even stumbled slightly once, but caught himself with a practiced flick of his cape, turning it into a dramatic pose. Crowd roared their approval, thinking it was all part of the act or simply attributing his slightly off-kilter movements to the raw energy he exuded. Behind him, the band members were starting to look less comfortable. Scotty Moore, on lead guitar, glanced nervously at the ceiling, his fingers faltering for a split second before Elvis's unwavering rhythm pulled him back. DJ Fontana on drums adjusted his stool, his eyes wide as his cymbal stands rattled. Even the stoic backup singers were exchanging worried glances, their harmonies a little less pristine than usual. But Elvis, facing the adoring crowd, saw none of their unease. He was in the zone, a performer possessed, convinced that his team was just playing along with the incredible new effects. "Yeah, feel that groove," Elvis shouted into the microphone, his voice booming over the music. He thought he was encouraging the band to really embrace the shaking effect, to make it sound even more awful. He was living for this moment, the thrill of the unknown, the spontaneity of a performance that was literally shaking the room. He could see a few people in the front rows looking around, some with confused expressions, others with slightly widened eyes. "They're impressed," he thought. "They're wondering how we're doing this." Suddenly, a series of dull thuds echoed from somewhere backstage, like heavy objects falling. Elvis chuckled, imagining stagehands furiously working levers and pulleys to create his elaborate illusion. He decided to play along, pointing dramatically baged with one hand while holding his mic with the other. "Looks like we got some real movers and shakers back there tonight," he quipped. And the audience, misunderstanding, laughed heartily. He loved this interaction, this back and forth, making them part of the magic. A distinct rattling started from the overhead sound system, and then a piercing, high-pitched squeal of feedback momentarily drowned out the music. The band winced. Elvis, however, thought it was a brilliant touch, an intentional sound effect to simulate the creaking and groaning of a massive structure. Under strain, he threw his head back, let out a primal yell, and then launched into a guitar solo, his fingers flying across the strings, as if battling the very forces of nature. He was putting on the show of a lifetime, pushing the boundaries of live entertainment, making it an experience that went beyond just music. His cape swirled as he spun, and as he landed, the stage beneath him bucked noticeably. It wasn't just a tremor now, it was a jolt. A ripple went through the audience. Some people gasped. A woman in the third row let out a small, startled scream. Elvis, mistaking it for excitement, grinned. "You like that, baby?" he purred, his voice dripping with charisma. He was convinced this was the pinnacle of special effects, something that would define his Las Vegas residency. He was the king, and he made the earth move. Little did he know the earth was actually trying to tell him something entirely different. He was so utterly absorbed in his performance, so committed to the idea that this was an elaborate, ground-ring act, that the real signs of trouble were completely lost on him. He truly believed he was just putting on the best show of his life. The music was still pounding, but now a new sound began to cut through it. A low, insistent beep, 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 followed by a calm, modulated voice over the hotel's public address system. "Attention, ladies and gentlemen. This is a drill, a massive earthquake drill, is now in progress. Please remain calm and follow the instructions of hotel staff. We repeat, this is a drill." Elvis, mid-spin, paused for a split second. He heard the announcement, he heard it. But his brain, already convinced this was a show, instantly categorized it as a theatrical element. "Brilliant," he thought. "They're really selling it. A recorded voiceover like something from a disaster movie, that's commitment." He winked at the drummer DJ, who looked like a deer caught in headlights. Elvis threw his head back and laughed, a rich, booming sound that filled the showroom. "You hear that, folks?" He boomed into the microphone, his voice easily overpowering the faint announcement. "Sounds like old Elvis is shaking things up so much. They gotta warn folks. Don't you worry, we ain't going nowhere." He then launched into an even more exaggerated hip swivel, as if to physically demonstrate his control over the earthquake. He pointed at the ceiling, then made a sweeping gesture with his hand as if commanding the tremors to stop. He even started singing a modified lyric. "When the earth shakes, I'll still be here shaking with you, my dears." The crowd, a mix of dedicated fans and bewildered tourists, responded in various ways. Some, still caught up in the Elvis magic, cheered and clapped, believing him completely. Others, who had heard the announcement more clearly or had friends and family tugging at their sleeves, began to stand up looking for exits. A froti, a feud half, die Ustav Restani. Directing, Pa Porny, to Ferdy Pa. He pointed at one of the staff members, a woman in a crisp uniform who was trying to usher a group of elderly ladies toward an exit. Elvis gave her a playful salute. "You keep 'em safe, sugar," he yelled, making a grand gesture with his arm. The woman paused, looked at him with a mix of disbelief and exasperation, then continued her urgent work. The stage continued to shudder. Lights flickered more violently, now occasionally going out for a second before snapping back on. A spotlight fixture overhead swung with such force, it seemed precarious. Behind Elvis' rhythm guitarist, James Burton's face was pale. He gestured frantically towards Elvis, mouthing something, but Elvis just thought he was asking for a cue or praising his showmanship. He gave James a thumbs up, signaling him to keep playing louder to match the intensity of the special effects. "Come on now, Vegas," Elvis cried, sweat dripping down his face. "You think a little rumble's gonna stop the king? Not on your life." He pulled a silk scarf from his neck, wiped his brow dramatically, and then, with a flourish, tossed it into the audience. Several hands shot up to grab it, momentarily distracting a small group who had been heading for the aisle. He was so caught up in the performance, so convinced of the illusion, that he was inadvertently hindering the very drill he thought he was part of. The recorded voice came again, louder this time, tinged with a slight urgency. "This is a real-time drill. All occupants must evacuate the building immediately. Please use the designated. This is not a test." Elvis heard it again. His interprete. "Okay, so it's a real-time drill within the act, like a play within a play." "They're upping the ante," he grinned. He grabbed his microphone, pulled it close, and leaned in conspiratorially to the audience. "They're mighty serious about this drill, ain't they?" he whispered playfully, then straightened up, his voice booming. "But you know what we're gonna see it through? Ain't no drill gonna stop the rock and roll." He launched into the opening chords of Jailhouse Rock, his movements even more frantic and energetic, perfectly in sync with the perceived chaos of the earthquake. He believed he was putting on the most captivating, most immersive, most unforgettable show of his entire career. The irony was completely lost on him. The showroom, moments ago a unified chorus of adulation, was now a fractured landscape of confusion and growing fear. While Elvis was lost in his powerful rendition of Jailhouse Rock, believing every tremor and announcement to be part of an elaborate theatrical experience, the reality was starkly different for the audience. In the front rows, the initial amusement had vanished, replaced by genuine distress. An elderly woman, her face pale, clutched her husband's arm, urging him to move. "Marvin, we need to go. This isn't right," she pleaded. But Marvin, caught between the booming music and his wife's panic, simply stared at Elvis, bewildered. They had paid good money for this show, and here was Elvis, still singing, still gyrating, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around him. Further back, closer to the exits, a more organized movement had begun. Hotel staff, their patience wearing thin, were now more forcefully directing people. "Please, ma'am, sir, this way," they urged, pointing to the emergency doors that now stood ajar, revealing the well-lit concrete stairwells beyond. Calm, modulated voice on the PA system continued its urgent directive, now interspersed with the sound of a fire alarm. a piercing, relentless wail that cut through the music like a knife. Elvis, ever the showman, simply raised his voice, powering through the alarm. He thought, "Man, they really want to make this feel real. Fire alarms, too. This is over the top." He even incorporated the wail into his performance, using a dramatic pause in his singing to let the alarm blare for a second, then jumping back in with renewed intensity, as if defying the very sound of danger. "Ain't no alarm gonna stop this party," he yelled. And a smattering of loyal fans, still in awe of his stamina, actually cheered. But the cheers were fewer now. Most eyes in the audience were darting around looking for their loved ones for the fastest way out. Some brave souls tried to shout to Elvis, "It's real. Get off the stage," one man yelled, his voice hoarse. Another woman stood up, waving her arms wildly, trying to get his attention. "It's an earthquake. A drill," she screamed, her words swallowed by the music and the alarm. Elvis caught glimpses of these frantic gestures. He interpreted them as heightened fan enthusiasm. People desperate for his attention, for a scarf, for a handshake. He gave them a dazzling smile, a reassuring wink, and blew them a kiss. "You sweet things," he crooned, thinking they were just getting into the spirit of the immersive experience. He even paused his singing for a moment, walked to the edge of the stage and extended his hand towards the screaming woman, thinking she wanted to touch him. She recoiled, staring at him with terror in her eyes, before turning and scrambling towards an exit. Elvis frowned slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face for the first time. Gee, that was odd. Maybe she just got stage fright. Backstage, Colonel Parker was losing his mind. He was a stout man, usually unflappable, but now he was pacing like a caged tiger. He had been trying to get a message to Elvis for the last 5 minutes. "Get him off the stage. He's gonna get hurt. This isn't a show, it's a drill. A real drill," he roared at a trembling stagehand. The stagehand, pale and sweating, tried to run onto the stage, but was quickly intercepted by a hotel security guard, who was himself struggling to maintain order amongst the panicked musicians, trying to evacuate. "We can't go near him, Colonel. He's still performing. The stage is moving too much," shouted the stagehand. Colonel Parker slapped his forehead. He saw the band members one by one abandoning their instruments, some giving Elvis a last bewildered glance before rushing towards the nearest exit. Elvis, still caught in his rock and roll trance, seemed not to notice the dwindling ranks of his band. Or perhaps he just thought they were on a break, or part of the act. He spun around looking for his drummer, DJ, to cue him for a guitar solo. But DJ Fontana was nowhere to be seen, his drum kit now abandoned, a lonely testament to the real danger. Elvis's brow furrowed. Okay, where'd he go? He shrugged, decided to launch into an impromptu a cappella section, letting his powerful voice fill the room, a defiant sound against the blare of the fire alarm and the continuing tremors. He was still the king, still in control, still believing he was orchestrating the most incredible show Las Vegas had ever seen, even as the truth swirled around him. Ignored and unheard, Elvis, sensing a slight lull in the instrumental backing, turned to find his stage empty save for a few abandoned instruments. His band, who had moments ago been a unified force of rhythm and melody, had vanished. He frowned, a genuine crease appearing between his famous eyebrows. "Where'd everybody go? Did they get a memo I didn't get?" he wondered, a flicker of genuine confusion finally breaking through his performance-fueled haze. He shrugged it off, attributing it to an extremely elaborate, unplanned intermission for the drill. Maybe they were supposed to evacuate as part of the act, to show the audience how it was done. He decided to turn it into a spontaneous a cappella moment. "Looks like it's just you and me now, Vegas," he belted out, winking at the crowd, who were now mostly on their feet, a significant portion actively moving towards the exits. He heard the urgent shouts of hotel staff. "This way. Follow the signs." And he mistook them for dramatic cues. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the wings, moving with a surprising speed, despite the shaking stage. It was Freddie, a veteran stagehand with a grizzled beard and a perpetually tired look. Freddie was usually quiet, efficient, and never, ever interfered with a performance. But now Freddie was practically running towards Elvis, his face a mask of concern. "Elvis! Elvis! You gotta get off! It's real! It's a drill!" Freddie shouted, his voice hoarse, barely audible over the remaining fire alarm and the persistent rumble. He tried to grab Elvis's arm. Elvis, however, saw Freddie's frantic approach and misinterpreted it entirely. Ah, the next act, the nervous stagehand who's part of the chaos. Brilliant! Elvis grinned, full of energy. He thought Freddie was either trying to play a prank on him or was part of the improvised drill scenario. He decided to play along to make it even more entertaining for the audience. "Well, look what we got here," Elvis exclaimed, turning to the audience and gesturing dramatically at Freddie. "Looks like someone back here is a little nervous about this earthquake. Come on, son, don't you worry. The king's got it all under control." Freddie, desperate, tried to explain again. "No, Elvis, seriously. It's not part of the show. It's a real emergency. We have to evacuate." Grabbed Elvis's arm again, trying to pull him towards the wings. Elvis, still thoroughly immersed in his fantasy, thought Freddie was trying to drag him off stage as part of the act. Perhaps for a quick costume change or a dramatic rescue sequence? He chuckled, deciding to turn it into a dance move. He twirled Freddie around, pulling him into a mock tango, his body still swaying with the tremors. "You're a pretty good dancer for a stagehand, Freddie." Elvis laughed completely, missing the look of utter despair on Freddie's face. Freddie, caught off guard by Elvis's strength and showmanship, stumbled and nearly fell. He finally broke free, looking utterly defeated. He knew there was no getting through to Elvis when he was like this. With one last desperate glance, Freddie shook his head and ran off stage, heading for the emergency exit that other crew members were now pouring through. Elvis watched him go, a triumphant smile on his face. Ha! He couldn't keep up with the king. He thought the whole interaction had been a hilarious, unscripted moment that only added to the realism of the earthquake drill. He turned back to the audience, still swaying to the non-existent music, trying to decide what to sing next without his band. He was feeling exhilarated, truly believing he was creating an unforgettable revolutionary performance. But as he looked out at the dwindling crowd, now less than half its original size, and saw the sheer terror on the faces of those who remained, a chill, unrelated to the air conditioning, began to creep up his spine. The fire alarm still wailed. The polite, calm voice on the PA system had been replaced by a more urgent, almost panicked tone. This is a really long drill, he thought. And those people, they don't look like they're having fun anymore? A seed of genuine doubt, cold and unwelcome, finally began to sprout in his mind. The last of the band had gone. The stage was empty, save for Elvis and the ghostly silhouettes of abandoned instruments. The fire alarm continued its relentless shriek. The voice on the PA system, now raw and unmodulated, barked, "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Real earthquake detected. Take cover if you cannot evacuate." Elvis heard it. This time the words, "not a drill," pierced through his performance-addled brain. His smile faltered. He stopped swaying. The microphone, which had felt like an extension of his arm moments ago, suddenly felt heavy and foreign in his hand. He looked at the few remaining audience members huddled under tables, or frantically trying to find their way to the exits, their faces contorted with genuine terror. No applause, no cheers, just fear. His heart began to pound, not with the rhythm of rock and roll, but with a cold, terrifying dread. He looked at the stage lights, swinging wildly now, not gently. He saw a decorative archway, part of the stage set, creak and groan above him. A large, ornate piece of plaster trim detached from the ceiling near the back of the showroom and crashed to the floor with a deafening crack, sending up a cloud of dust. People screamed. Elvis gasped. This wasn't an effect. This was real. The tremors beneath his feet were no longer a bass line. They were the earth itself groaning. The flickering lights weren't traumatic. They were failing. Cries from the audience weren't excitement. They were terror. He stood frozen, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. All this time he had been singing, dancing, joking, while real people were in real danger, while the building might be collapsing around them. The sheer foolishness, The monumental ego that had blinded him washed over him in a sickening wave. He felt a flush of shame burn his cheeks. He looked down at his white jumpsuit studded with rhinestones, absurdly out of place in this unfolding disaster. He, the king, who was supposed to protect his people, had been prancing around like a fool, utterly oblivious. He could hear the distinct sound of shattering glass from somewhere back. Terrible creaking sound came from the main support beams of the showroom ceiling. He wanted to run, to hide, to vanish, but he couldn't move. He felt rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the sudden, overwhelming truth. He watched as a security guard, a burly man with a kind face, struggled to help a woman in a wheelchair navigate the uneven floor towards an exit. The guard looked up, saw Elvis standing there, and for a moment their eyes met. The guard's expression wasn't angry or amused, but simply weary. A silent plea for Elvis to finally understand. The king of rock and roll, who had commanded millions with a single glance, suddenly felt smaller than he ever had in his life. The microphone slipped from his grasp, clattering to the stage floor. The feedback a sudden shrill scream that pierced the air before dying out. The music had stopped. The applause was gone. Only the sounds of the real world remained. The rumbling earth, the shrieking alarm, the cries of fear, and the crashing of debris. He felt a deep tremor, a violent shudder that nearly knocked him off his feet. He staggered, catching himself on the edge of the abandoned drum kit. A stage light fixture directly above him. Its wires frayed, swung precariously, then suddenly snapped loose from its mount. It plummeted towards him. Time seemed to slow. He saw it coming, a heavy metallic missile heading straight for his head. Closed his eyes, bracing for impact, the ultimate humbling. This was no act. This was terrifyingly, brutally real. The heavy stage light fixture, plummeting towards Elvis, seemed destined to be the final jarring exclamation mark on his terrifying realization. But fate, or perhaps a guardian angel, had other plans. Just as it was about to strike, the stage lurched violently with another severe tremor, throwing Elvis off balance. He stumbled sideways, falling to one knee, and the massive light crashed onto the exact spot where he had been standing moments before, sending sparks flying and a cloud of dust into the air. Elvis gasped, eyes wide open now, staring at the crumpled metal on the stage floor. He felt the vibrations of the impact through his kneecap. A split second more, and it would have been him. The reality of the danger, the genuine bone-chilling threat, solidified in his mind. This was no game, no drill. This was real. He scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs. The fear was primal, raw. He looked out at the emptying showroom, at the faces of the last few people frantically making their escape. His gaze landed on a small girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, clutching a worn teddy bear. She was crying, her face streaked with tears, as her mother pulled her frantically towards an exit. "Mommy, I'm scared," the little girl wailed, her voice surprisingly clear amidst the remaining chaos. "Elvis is still there. Is he okay?" The mother, her own face etched with fear, gave a quick reassuring squeeze to her daughter, then glanced back at the stage. Her eyes met Elvis's. There was no anger, no judgment, just a profound weariness, a plea she needed to get her child to safety. Elvis, seeing the sheer, unadulterated fear in the child's eyes, finally understood the full gravity of his monumental mistake. It wasn't just about his ego or his performance. It was about the safety of these people, his fans, whom he had inadvertently put at risk with his oblivious act. He took a shaky breath. His voice, usually so powerful, came out as a whisper. Go on, little one," he murmured, his gaze fixed on the girl. He made a small reassuring gesture with his hand, trying to convey that he understood that they needed to be safe. At that moment, a hotel security guard, the same kind-faced man from before, finally reached the stage. He didn't yell, he didn't rush. He simply walked with a steady, determined pace, his gaze fixed on Elvis. He was a stocky man, probably in his late 40s, with a no-nonsense but compassionate demeanor. "Mr. Presley," the guard said, his voice calm but firm. "The building is evacuating immediately." He didn't try to pull him, didn't shout. He simply extended a hand, an offer of guidance. Elvis stared at the hand, Then at the guard's face. The man's eyes were steady, reflecting a quiet authority and concern. The last vestiges of his performative self crumbled. The king was gone. What remained was a humbled, utterly mortified man. He nodded slowly, his throat tight. He reached out and took the guard's hand. The guard didn't say, "I told you so," or "What were you thinking?" He simply gave a small, understanding nod. "This way, sir," the guard said, pulling Elvis gently but firmly towards the nearest backstage exit. The tremors were still ongoing, though less violent now. The fire alarm still shrieked, but Elvis finally felt grounded, his mind clear, his body heavy with the weight of realization. As he was led off the stage, he cast one last look back at the empty showroom, now dim and dust-filled. The broken plaster and fallen light fixture, stark reminders of the peril he had so blithely ignored. Profound silence, broken only by the alarm and distant sounds of the outside world, was deafening. The music had died, the performance was over, and the king finally had been brought back to earth. The journey from the brightly lit stage to the dim utilitarian baked corridors felt like a descent into another world. The security guard, whose Nontag read Hank, kept a firm, steady grip on Elvis's arm, guiding him through the maze of cables, props, and abandoned equipment. Elvis stumbled, once disoriented, but Hank's grip was unyielding, keeping him upright. "Just a little further, Mr. Presley," Hank said, his voice calm amidst the echoes of the blaring fire alarm and the distant shouts of emergency personnel. The tremors, though less severe, still made the concrete floor shudder beneath their feet. Elvis felt every vibration, no longer interpreting it as a special effect, but as the raw power of the earth. They passed by a group of hotel staff and crew members, huddled in a stairwell looking pale and shaken. They recognized Elvis, of course. Their expressions ranged from shock to mild disbelief, but no one said a word. They simply watched as Hank led the king away. Elvis, usually so keen to acknowledge his fans and crew, kept his gaze fixed straight ahead, overcome with a crippling wave of embarrassment. He felt like the biggest fool in Las Vegas. Hank led him down several flights of concrete stairs, the air growing cooler, carrying the faint smell of dust and damp concrete. Finally, they emerged into the hotel's spacious temporary assembly area outside, a large parking lot that was now filled with hundreds of hotel guests and staff, all looking a little bewildered but mostly relieved. Emergency vehicles, their lights flashing, lined the perimeter, and paramedics moved calmly through the crowd. The fresh air hit Elvis like a physical slap, cutting through the haze of the showroom. He blinked, adjusting to the sudden openness. He could see Colonel Parker in the distance, waving his arms frantically, his face a mixture of fury and immense relief. But Hank didn't take him directly to the colonel. Instead, he led Elvis to a quieter corner, near a large empty tour bus away from the main crowd. "All right, Mr. Presley, you're safe now," Hank said finally, releasing his grip. His face, under the flashing emergency lights, was etched with concern. "Are you hurt at all? Did anything hit you?" Elvis shook his head, still trying to process everything. No, I'm all right, just shaken." He paused, then looked Hank directly in the eye. I didn't know. I thought it was part of the show. An act." The words felt flimsy, inadequate, pathetic even. Hank nodded slowly, his expression softening gentle. "You were really committed to the performance, sir, but when the knotted drill announcement came over and the ceiling started coming down, we knew we had to get you out." Elvis felt a fresh wave of shame. "I'm so sorry, Hank," he mumbled. "I should have listened. I don't know what I should have done." "But not that." He gestured vaguely back at the hotel, still trembling from the aftershocks. "I put people in danger. I was just playing a fool." Hank placed a hand on Elvis's shoulder, a gesture of quiet reassurance. "You were doing your job, Mr. Presley, and you do it very well sometimes. When you're so deep into something, it's hard to see what's really happening around you, especially when you're under all those lights. But for future reference, Mr. Presley, If the hotel staff are running away, it's usually a good sign to follow. A small, wry smile touched Hank's lips. I'll remember that, Hank. Believe me. He looked around at the assembled crowd, at the emergency workers, at the flashing lights. He saw genuine heroes, people who were trained to handle real crises unlike him, who only knew how to entertain. He felt a profound sense of humility, a stark contrast to the almost godlike persona he exuded on stage. King had been brought back to earth, not by a natural disaster, but by the kindness of a humble security guard who saw beyond the rhinestone suit to the man beneath. The wait in the assembly area felt interminable, a mix of anxiety and exhaustion hanging in the cool night air. Finally, after what seemed like an hour but was likely closer to 20 minutes, an amplified voice cut through the remaining murmurs. Attention, everyone. This is the hotel management. The drill has officially concluded. The building has been thoroughly checked by emergency services and is deemed safe for re-entry. We appreciate your core nature. People started to move slowly at first, then with more purpose, heading back towards the hotel entrance. The flashing lights of the emergency vehicles dimmed, some already pulling away. The fire alarm, which had been silenced moments before the announcement, left a ringing echo in Elvis's ears. Colonel Parker, red-faced and huffing, finally made his way over to Elvis, practically bulldozing through the remaining stragglers. Elvis? What in the blazes was that? Are you all right? My God, son, I thought I was going to have to drag you off that stage myself. He was half shouting, half whispering, his concern warring with his professional exasperation. Elvis just nodded, feeling a fresh wave of mortification. I'm fine, Colonel. Just embarrassed. I thought it was part of the show, I really did. He saw the disbelief in Parker's eyes, then a flicker of understanding. Part of the show? Parker exclaimed, throwing his hands up in the air. Son, when the ceiling starts falling and the security guards are yelling for evacuation, that ain't no show. That's a mess. A very expensive, very dangerous mess. But even as he scolded, the relief in his voice was palpable. He clapped Elvis hard on the back, a gesture of both reprimand and affection. Well, at least you're safe, and I suppose no one will ever forget this performance, eh? He actually managed a small, wry smile. Elvis grimaced. I sure hope they forget my part of it. His band members, having regrouped, now approached cautiously. Scotty Moore, ever the calm one, just shook his head. Elvis, man, we were trying to tell you. We thought you'd gone completely mad. Yeah, I thought you were going to start singing to a falling chandelier. Had us all wondering if you decided to try out for the circus. Elvis looked at his band, his loyal musicians who had stood by him through thick and thin, and saw not judgment but a mix of relief, amusement, and genuine camaraderie. They weren't angry. They were just glad he was okay. I am so sorry, fellas, Elvis said, his voice genuinely contrite. I was just completely caught up. I truly believed it was the most amazing stage effect. I was so convinced. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of sheer exasperation with himself. I swear the king went temporarily blind and deaf to reality. James Burton, the rhythm guitarist, put a hand on his shoulder. Don't sweat it, boss. You're a performer. Happens to the best of us, I guess, though I've never seen it happen quite like that. A few chuckles broke out among the band members. Suddenly, a group of fans, having heard the all clear, hurried over their relief, turning to excitement at seeing Elvis. Elvis! Oh my God, you're okay! A woman shrieked, rushing forward. We were so worried. You just kept singing. Elvis looked at them, not with the usual dazzling smile, but with a humbled expression. I'm sorry if I scared anyone, he said, his voice softer than usual. I made a mistake. I thought it was part of a drill, part of the show. I truly did, but I should have listened. We all need to take these things seriously. The fans, seeing his genuine remorse, didn't press him. Instead, they offered words of comfort, assuring him they were just relieved. He was safe. It was a heartwarming moment. a testament to the deep affection his fans had for him, even when he made a monumental blunder. Elvis, the king, learned a valuable lesson that night, not just about safety, but about humility and the unwavering kindness of those who truly cared about him. The morning after the infamous earthquake drill, the International Hotel's showroom buzzed with a different kind of energy. Instead of the usual pre-show excitement, there was a strange mix of lingering awe and nervous laughter. Crew members moved around, checking equipment, ensuring everything was truly safe. The fallen light fixture was gone, replaced with a sparkling new one, and the minor plaster damage had been repaired. Elvis, typically a ball of boundless energy before a performance was subdued, he walked onto the stage, not in his dazzling jumpsuit, but in a simple shirt and slacks, looking thoughtfully at the spot where the light had nearly hit him. The events of the previous night played back in his mind like a bizarre, terrifying dream. The shaking stage, the screaming alarm, Freddie's desperate pleas, Hank's calm guidance, and the little girl's tear-streaked face. Colonel Parker found him there. "Well, son," he said, clearing his throat. "Word's out. Everyone's talking about it. The Elvis sell more tickets tonight." He gave a nervous chuckle, gauging Elvis's mood. Elvis turned, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I doubt it'll be quite the same, Colonel. No more impromptu earthquake dances for me." He paused. "You know, Hank, the security guard. He was really something, and the crew, they were amazing. And the hotel staff, they were all doing their job, keeping people safe while I was well," shaking his head. "You were performing," Parker supplied, trying to offer comfort. "I was being an idiot," Elvis corrected gently, "but it taught me a lesson. A big one." He looked out at the empty seats. Safety first, right? Always. Later that night, the showroom was once again packed. Tension was palpable, a mix of anticipation for Elvis's legendary performance and curiosity about how he would address the previous night's incident. The band took their places, looking a little more serious than usual. Elvis emerged bathed in the spotlight, in a new glittering white jumpsuit. The crowd roared louder than ever. He grabbed the microphone, paused, and for the first time, a genuine, slightly embarrassed smile spread across his face. "Well, hello, Las Vegas," he boomed, his voice as powerful as ever. "Heard you all had quite the shake-up last night, eh?" A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. He paused for dramatic effect. "Now I gotta tell you folks, your king here. Well, he had quite the experience himself." He took a deep breath, and his voice became more serious. "I gotta admit, I was so caught up in the music in the show that I thought it was all part of an act. A fancy new special effect, thought I was just making the earth move with my hips." He mimed a hip thrust, and the audience erupted in laughter and applause. "But then," he continued, "I found out it was real. And let me tell you, that's a humbling experience. I want to apologize to anyone I scared or who thought I was, well, a complete fool. I learned a big lesson last night detecting with them. And that lesson is, when those folks from the hotel and the security and the emergency folks tell you to move, you move. They're the real heroes, looking out for all of us." He then looked towards the wings, a genuine heartfelt smile on his face. "In fact, I want to give a special shout out to a man named Hank, a security guard, who finally and patiently got this stubborn old king off the stage last night. Hank, you're a true gentleman, and I owe you a dance." He winked, and the crowd laughed, cheering for Hank, who was likely blushing back to Elvis, then took a deep breath, his eyes twinkling. "Now that," said I, "still got a show to put on for you folks tonight, and I promise you the only thing shaking tonight will be your hips, not the floor." The crowd cheered, louder than ever. The incident, instead of being a disaster, had become a moment of shared humanity, a testament to Elvis's ability to connect with his audience even in his moments of vulnerability. He launched into his first song, his voice full of warmth and renewed energy. The king was back, and he was more grounded, more humble, and perhaps even more beloved than before. The show was electric, full of life, and entirely free of any unexpected tremors. And for Elvis, that was perfectly all right.